What's going on, Jaguar fans? I'm going to talk about Cam Robinson and why is he so polarizing? Why do people want to keep him? And why are so many people ready to get rid of him? I'll explain my feelings on it and how it affects the draft in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I'm the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, Tony Wiggins, as it says right there on the screen if you're watching. And we'd like to thank you for making us your first listen because it's your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. That can also be found on YouTube at the Locked On Jaguars page. Make sure you get there, check in, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and then make sure you hit the bell so that you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode. And wherever you get your audio podcast, make sure you lock in on that location every day and look for Locked On Jaguars so you don't get left out. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase. Shout out to the everydayers for joining the show every single day, and you could be an everyday as long as you join the show every day just like they do. Like my man Corey that caught me coming out of my other business today and says in the rain, I listen to your show every day, man. Locked On Jaguars. So shout out to you, Corey, and you and yours. We'll talk about Cam Robinson. And I got to tell you what my motivation for it was. My motivation was primarily because of over the last several years, I've been talking about the offensive line in Jacksonville needing to be upgraded, repaired, whatever, right? I wanted it to be stellar, not just good. I wanted it to be really good. Okay. Are they there yet? No, they're far from it. In fact, they've made some improvements in the offseason, but I still don't think that they are upper tier. I don't think they're in the upper half of the NFL. And for this team, that's very, very important. I saw a video yesterday or early today, depending on when you're listening to this, of Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh was talking about the one position on your team the one position group, if you will, that doesn't depend on other people being good for them to do their job. And it was the offensive line. They don't depend on nobody else. Now, they depend on each other, but as a whole, as a group, like if you got a group of wide receivers that are good, but the quarterback can't hit the side of a barn with a bowling ball, then guess what? They're going to suffer. If you have a quarterback that's very good with a bunch of receivers that can't get open, they're going to suffer. If you have DBs that are good, but the defensive line can't pass rush, they can't cover all day, they're going to suffer. The one group on the team that does not depend on some other group or on another player to be good for them to do their job is the offensive line. I swear I never thought of it that way. The way I had always thought of it was this. They're the one group on your team that if they ain't right, they can make your whole football team look bad. They can change your trajectory so quick and fast. Like you could have an entire roster full of great players, but if your offensive line stinks, y'all can get blown out. I'm serious. If you can't block people, it is embarrassing to watch. It's a bad feeling when you can't block people. You can't run, you can't pass block, you can't do anything, can't function. Defense is getting tired because they're mad because it's 3 and out, or turnovers. So that led me to go back and really, really think about Cam Robinson. And I got the good and the bad. So the short-term answer I'm going to give you in segment 2 is going to be the pro side of having a pro that's 6'6", 330 pounds like Cam Robinson. And then there's going to be a long-term answer I'm going to give you in segment 3 that's going to say the negative side. The negative side has nothing to do with Cam Robinson. The negative side has something to do with team building, team structure, and it also has something to do with people who don't make decisions that they need to make. It's because they're just trying to survive and keep their job. So that's where we're going with that. But I'm gonna get right here and make sure that everyone understands how I feel about Cam Robinson. Is he a top half of the left tackles in the NFL? That's arguable. I think in pass blocking, he probably is. And I think in run blocking, if he's not, he's close. I don't think there are 20 guys in the league better than him. I also believe that before you remove or move on from a guy like Cam Robinson, you need to make sure that you have someone better to replace him. I also think that if he were to hit the free agency market, based on what I've seen from what other teams have done, he gets signed the first day and get a big contract that looks like the one that the Jaguars are paying him. So I don't think he's overpaid. I don't think he's overvalued. I don't think that Cam Robinson is someone that the Jaguars should actively move on from. In the past, I have said that they ought to trade him. I said the same thing about Josh Allen. It has nothing to do with their talent. It has everything to do with that team. Not that they don't deserve good players, but everything that I've always said about the Jaguars is they're non-committal. They'll commit a little bit. They'll commit a little bit, and it'll be like in 2 or 3 years, we'll revisit it. I used to criticize Dave Caldwell for that same thing. Well, we just get this guy until we can replace him with somebody better. And that's fine if that's how you have to go. But hearing that come from the person that's responsible for finding the best players, usually it kind of bothers me the wrong way. That's like you going to Vegas making $1,000 bet on one team, right, to win 10,000. But then you take another $1,000 and you bet on the other team too. Well, just in case we miss and don't get the 10, we'll at least get our 1,000 back. That's called hedging your bets. And you hedge your bets when you're unsure of yourself. Now, some of the people in personnel would seem like they're hedging their bets because they're unsure about the player, because you never know what you're going to get. And I don't put that on NFL players. I put that on you, because I put that on them, because the bottom line, that's a part of the vetting process. So there's half of the fans think, yeah, we need to move on from Cam Robinson. The other half, when they saw what the team looked like without Cam Robinson and realized they weren't as physical, said, you know what? I don't know about that. So there's this thing around the league. They love guys who have played games, right, and have not been liabilities. They love experience. They love big physical guys that other guys respect. Make no mistake about it. Cam Robinson is all of those things. But where it applies to here, and this is what I'm going to get into in the next 2 segments, I have consistently tried to look at this team from a team building perspective. I have consistently tried to look at this team from a macro perspective, from a perspective of how good can they be for a sustained period of time? Because I don't look at each season individually, because that's putting too much on a team to win a Super Bowl, because that's all we want, right? I think we do. I get in a little debates every now and then with Jaguar fans that go, we won 9 games, 2 in a row. Do y'all remember how bad we were? I don't care about how bad we were. I don't care that they won 9 games 2 years in a row. I care about they continue to lose games that they shouldn't. That's my point. I am not allowing the baggage from the past to continue to mesmerize me to the point where I accept mediocrity. That's just not the way that I move. So I also don't look at one season like we got to win it this year. I'd much rather take the approach that you have to be good for a sustained period of time to give yourself a shot, that at some point in that window, and that window usually revolves around the career of a quarterback, at some point during that window, you're going to have a chance to get you 1 or maybe 2, right? That's the way that I'm looking at it. And along the way, you know what? Doesn't mean if you have 10 years and you only get 1 Super Bowl, but 9 of those 10 years you were in the playoffs and you were knocking at the door, that's a decade of football enjoyment. Don't sit here and let anybody tell you that it's not. It is. It's the same way it is in college football. I was a big Bobby Bowden fan. Bobby Bowden coached 30-some odd years and won, 2 or 3 two championships. Florida State has won 3 championships my entire life. And I've been a Florida State fan since I was 40, since I was 6 years old, and that was 49 years ago. And I absolutely love Florida State in college football. It is okay. The reason why is, though, because for most of those years they had a chance and they were good and they gave me a lot of enjoyment. So that's why I look at it this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at whether or not Cam Robinson is the best short-term answer. And I'm going to tell you right now, the answer to that question is yes. And I'll tell you why I don't think he's the long-term answer, but it has nothing to do with him. I'm going to do that in order in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. I want to let y'all know about FanDuel first, which is a sponsor for today's show. Man, if you thought FanDuel was going to end when the NFL ended or college ended, you are crazy, because this NBA and college stuff has me on the edge of my seat. The NBA is ready to get into the playoffs. The Lakers beat the Bucks without LeBron last night, right? After being down almost 20 points. And then in college basketball, my bracket is all busted up, but I can still bet on the individual teams as we are looking at the Sweet 16. So say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on big upsets or a one seed, it's time to go dancing around America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, all one word, and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKON, to get started on FanDuel. All right, second segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. We are talking about the polarization of Cam Robinson and a conversation that keeps coming up about Cam Robinson. So why is Cam Robinson on everybody's mind now? Well, if you go back to the press conference that Trent Baalke had at the, I wouldn't say at the end of the year, it was more, it was late, right? But it wasn't at the end of the year. It was right before free agency and all of that started. I think he was the last GM to talk to the team. One of the things that he mentioned when he started talking about who's going to be here, he said that the franchise tag that was used on Josh Allen, Josh is going to be here, is going to be a Jaguar. Said that they were going to try to work something out with Calvin Ridley, and you knew, and he said that Calvin knows where they are. He knows where they are, but now you know Calvin. We know where he is. He's in Tennessee. He's playing for the Titans. And someone asked him about Cam Robinson, and that's when, out of all of the times we're asking about players, now all of a sudden he goes, I'm not going to get into to all of that, answer questions about guys. And then somebody asked him, could Anton Harrison play left tackle? He says, absolutely, and took a swig of water. He looked like Jimmy Conway in that's the character that was played by Robert De Niro in Goodfellas, when Jimmy Conway asked his buddy, do you think Maury tells his wife everything? And he goes, nah, I don't think so. And Jimmy starts smoking a cigarette, looking side-eyed over there at Maury, because you knew what Maury's fate was. That's the look that Trent Baalke had on his face, like he knew something that we didn't know. After that press conference, me and every other member of the media and a whole bunch of fans said, Cam's gone. They're going to get rid of Cam. They're going to save $16, $17 million in cap space. They're going to move Anton Harrison over, and then they're probably going to draft one of these young right tackles in the draft, and the draft is full of guys that can play on the right side, right? And that gives you two bookend left tackles that are 22, 23 years old to grow with Trevor Lawrence, especially now that Anton Harrison has shown you how good he is. And shout out to Trent Baalke for drafting him, okay? And we thought that they would do that, go young in that way, and then use free agency money to fix the interior of the line. But we were partially right. They did use free agency money to fix the interior of the line. But Cam Robinson's still on this team. Does it mean he's going to still be here? I don't know. So that's why we get to this point when we talk about the draft. I have left open the chance that if the right player falls to them, that they would draft him even if he's a right tackle. Bring him in as a depth piece for the future. And if he wins the job and he's ready to go right now, go ahead and try to work out a deal and move Cam Robinson and try to see if there's somebody else that can that wants to give you something for him, or you can save the money on cap space. That's the thought that I have, especially when you still have to remember they still have to um, get a long-term deal done with Josh Allen. They may or may not. They've been talking about the extension for Trevor and maybe starting that process. They mentioned extending Andre Cisco and Tyson Campbell. They've mentioned that those guys will be up, and maybe they start looking at that situation. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because that has to happen before the start of the season. Because as we know, looking at the Josh situation and the Calvin Ridley situation, the Jaguars do not negotiate, and Trent Baalke does not do negotiations during the season. At least that's the information that's been put out there to me. So once this all happens, and once you draft guys and they come into mini camp in around May, between May and training camp, you're gonna have like a few months to make this decision. In the draft, somebody else might fall to them, or they could do like what I think is the unthinkable and package up a bunch of stuff and move and trade up. And I don't know why they do that this year. But if they were targeting a specific player, like one of those wide receivers, like maybe Rome Odunze, if there's somebody like Arizona, not really Arizona, that's too high. But if somebody like Atlanta wants to come back and get more picks, come back to 17, take the Jaguars' second round pick, let the Jags come up to the top 10 and get somebody else, that could be a thought. I really can't honestly tell you that I have a finger on the pulse of the situation enough to tell you exactly what I think they're going to do, because I don't know. But with that being said, all of this centers around how do they really feel about Cam Robinson? How do they really feel? And I said this about another player at the same position, Walker Little. There's nothing over the next, I said this 2 years ago, there's nothing over the next 2 years that's going to tell you how they feel about Walker Little more than what they do personnel-wise. They still have Cam Robinson making a bunch of money. They signed Anton Harrison. And we're having a conversation right now talking about them yet again getting another offensive tackle potentially in the draft. More than anything, that tells you how they feel about Walker Little. It is not their job to come out and tell you that we don't think he's very good. They are never going to say that, ever. Because they're always trying to get the best out of guys. And then you want the best out of him, even if he's your swing tackle. That's what you want, right? And you ain't going to get there saying it out loud. So it's not as if we're sitting here asking the management or the personnel staff to come out and say something about a player that is counterintuitive to the mission. And the mission is to get as much as you can out of those guys and get as much as you can for those guys whenever that time becomes appropriate. Short-term answer, keep him. Draft something else. The Jaguars have enough needs that they don't need to be giving up picks, right? They do. Draft something else. Draft another receiver if you need to. Draft a corner. Draft an edge rusher to help with depth with those guys. That could be another issue. What if they don't work out a deal with Josh Allen? Could you see them draft another edge rusher with the hopes that maybe that guy's pretty good and they'll play with Josh this year on the franchise tag, and then let both Josh and Cam go after keeping them? And then that frees up $40 million in cap space that they can use to maybe give their quarterback an extension and maybe extend those other people. Do you think that maybe they're looking at it that way? Short-term answer, like the one right in front of me, I'm going to tell you right now, I'd keep him. If the alternative is keeping him or moving on from him and then using draft picks to replace him or to move up for somebody else, yeah, I think I'd go ahead and keep him this year. From where I sit today, that's what I do, based on what they've done. Now, at the start of free agency, I probably wouldn't have. I would have found a trade partner, or I would have got off the money and I would have used the money and allocated that money somewhere else. But that's just me. I'm going to give you the long-term alternative, and then I'll be interested to see what you guys think. And when you give me your answer, don't give me your answer in the form of a question, whether it's in the comments here or on social media. I'd rather you give me the answer and specifically, what would you do? I just told you what I do. At this point, from where I'm sitting today, I keep Cam Robinson. I use the resources on other people. I revisit him and Josh Allen after the year if they don't work an extension out with Josh Allen. And I'm not sure that they're going to do it with Josh. So all of these things play hand in hand. But I am, however, going to let you guys know that if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day on your TV and you have to turn down the volume when all that shouting starts, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, man. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for your everyday, for you every day to bring you the biggest shows without all that screaming. I promise you, I pushed the thing the other day. I muted my TV and I still heard those dudes hollering. Streaming on Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news 24/7 on your YouTube or on the free Fire TV app on Amazon, on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you know the long-term question that I have with the Jacksonville Jaguars as it pertains to Cam Robinson and team building and the polarization that we see amongst fans and some in the media about Cam Robinson. I'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Somebody told me today they can't wait till the schedule comes out because they want to know which games they can go to. And I told them about the Gametime app, because even if you wait until your money gets straight, or if you wait until the last minute, or if the schedule comes out late, whatever, it doesn't matter. You'll have somewhere where you can get tickets. That's right. Tickets to not only football games, but theater, comedy shows, plays, all of that stuff. You can get it at Gametime app, and there is no such thing as too late, because last minute tickets and flash deals and zone deals is what they specialize in. You won't hear nobody saying that your procrastination is not their emergency. At Gametime, it is their emergency. It's their job to get you tickets at the last minute with view seats. You know exactly where you're going to sit, the section, all of that stuff. So all you got to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On. That's LOCKED for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Tony Wiggins here, Locked On Jaguars, third and final segment, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. Talking about Big Cam Robinson, man, the dude, he's gone back and forth with some of the legacy players here. My man, Leon Searcy and him used to go back and forth on Twitter all the time. I think they might have squashed that. I hope they did. But I wouldn't characterize Cam Robinson as one of those dudes that I thought stole money here at Jacksonville. No, he's not. He's not the Pro Bowl or all-pro left tackle either, but you don't have to be that to be good. Now, a few years ago, him and Deion Dawkins, they signed like similar deals, right? Deion Dawkins was from Buffalo, and they were thought of in similar ways. Well, Deion Dawkins has ascended and now is considered one of the probably 5 or 6 best left tackles in the National Football League. Cam hasn't done that. He's been banged up a little bit. He missed, I can't recall the last time he played all of the games during the season, but that's a part of it. I think one of the things that bothers people, though, is on top of the injuries, he got suspended. He missed 10 games last year. He missed the first 4 because of performance-enhancing drugs and failing the drug test with the NFL. Don't know the specifics of it. Don't know if it was something really, really egregious, because, you know, you can do that without as trying to do it. Or you can just think that you're doing okay, and then all of a sudden you're not. But then there's other people that say if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So but the thing is we talked about the short-term answer of whether or not I would move on from Cam Robinson, and I wouldn't. And I think that's that way because I don't think that their talent level hasn't been raised enough, even with their new additions, for me to think that, okay, yeah, you can move on from him and start taking chances, especially when you consider who is drafting. And I give Trent Baalke credit for his first round picks, but we don't know that even if they let him go, that's the route that they go, because there are some left tackles or there are some right tackles that might end up being around later on that can help you a little bit. So we'll just have to see how the draft plays out in order to see whether or not that's true. But here's my long-term question. My long-term question is, what good does it do to keep him this year if you're looking at it from a big picture? If you're always talking about continuity on the offensive line, if you're always talking about cohesion and chemistry and all of these other things about the offensive line, what good does it do to keep him this year unless you're going to extend him too? To lower his cap, extend him out, keep him, make him a Jaguar for a decade, and then move on. Maybe he plays really, really well this year, right? got to think about you got to think about the team from a standpoint of financial construction, right? Would it be nice to have some bookend? So I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Yeah, it would have been nice to let Cam walk last year, right? And keep Juwan Taylor at right tackle, draft Anton Harrison, let him play left tackle. There you go. You got a guy 25 and a guy 21, 22, and you're riding out forever, right? And when that didn't happen, most people thought that the answer was somehow was what I just said with Walker Little, and it turned out that wasn't it. Folks really thought that Anton Harrison was more of the replacement for Cam Robinson eventually than he was Juwan Taylor, because they thought Juwan Taylor's replacement was Walker Little. Turns out none of that was true, right? What's the best thing to do for the team long term? The best thing to do is draft better beyond the first round so that these decisions become easier and you can move on from players quicker and faster. Before you have, see, it's one thing like you, the Chiefs, these, and I always use them because they're the champions, so get used to it. But it's one thing to say, okay, well, they can do this because they won. And you know what? You're right. But that's exactly the point. They won because they were doing that stuff. Now they didn't just start doing it now. Because they won, they were able to start doing that stuff. They could tell Tyreek Hill, hey man, you don't want it. This is what we got. If you don't want it, I give you permission to go seek a trade. Go ahead and do it. L'Jarius, hey man, this is what we got. If you don't want it, I give you permission to go seek a trade. Go ahead and do it. Right? Like really, really good players, like Willie Gay. Thank you. You know what? We're gonna let you go, man. Go ahead and test free agency. I'll see you later. You know why they didn't do that? Because of the dudes that you don't know that they have on that team already, or their confidence in their ability to replace them the same way. Like Jay-Z said, I heard people saying they made Hov say, okay, so make another one. Well, the Chiefs will go, okay, voila, here we go. I just did. The Jaguars have never gotten those guys in the first place. So how do you think they're going to replace the one guy that they probably, how can you trust that this team is going to do things in the long term that they've never done in the interim? They've never done it in the short term. This is the problem. This is the problem that you come up with when you try to figure out what this team is or isn't going to do, or what they should or shouldn't do. Because what they should or shouldn't do probably starts with you saying somebody else should be the ones making the decision in the first place. So then you got to go with this curve, right? And the curve is, well, it is Trent Baalke we're talking about here. So I would rather them go ahead and keep this safe thing than to take the risk that he's going to go out and be able to really, really have somebody behind him ready to go. What should have happened here was Walker Little should have been the guy. Walker Little should have, whether you wanted him to replace Juwan Taylor or whether you wanted him to replace Cam Robinson. This is Walker Little's fourth year. He was a second-round pick. This should have been the year that he was playing. This should have been the year where that development came in, and they should have actually had somebody behind him too that's going to be what Walker Little was to Cam Robinson. But they failed. And it's not about inheriting players. This is Trent Baalke. This is his team. They failed at it. They did not do a good job of finding those guys. I'll give you another example. They went and got Eric Armstead this year. They drafted Tyler Lacey last year. Tyler Lacey, 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", 280 some odd pounds. They took him in the fourth round. You know what else they took? They took Jay Tufele in the same year that they took Walker Little. But now they're having to go out here and get Eric Armstead. You say, wait a minute. Didn't the 49ers pay $90 million last year for a DT? Yeah, they did. And they've been knocking on the door at the Super Bowl for the last 4 years, and they're trying to get beyond that. The Jaguars haven't been close. And I know they went to that one playoff game and lost in Kansas City, but that doesn't count. So long-term question that I have is, if they're going to keep doing the same things the way that the way that they've been doing, the best thing that I can tell you is they ought to go ahead and extend Cam Robinson right now. Just give him an extension. Lower his cap number, give him a nice little cushy extension, and make him a Jacksonville Jaguar for a whole decade, as opposed to running him out of here next year, maybe Josh Allen at the same time, and whoever else you don't work an extension out with prior to that, and then having to go out here and find a left tackle in a draft that may not, or right tackle in a draft that is not as deep as the one you have now. This draft, because the Jaguars don't need a quarterback, and whether or not you think it's a great draft all around, it does not matter. The thing that does matter is teams are going to take quarterbacks and wide receivers all up and through the first 10 picks. And you're sitting there at 17, and it's a draft deep in offensive linemen, specifically offensive tackles, where everybody thinks they're all going to be good. And you're not going to get one because you didn't make a decision that you should have made a year ago. That's what it comes down to. So, one of the interesting things I want you to pay attention to, and I'm going to do a podcast about this tomorrow, are the Jags yinging when they should yang? That's the yin yang twins. I'm not talking about anything racial or ethnic. I'm talking about, are they going left when they should go right? And what I mean by that is offensive tackle and wide receiver are loaded in this draft in the first round. Would they draft something other than that? Because what they've done here, they've addressed offensive line, period, and they've addressed wide receiver in free agency, and they addressed corner. They use free agency and address 3 positions that are plentiful in this draft. Is that a mistake? I'll tell y'all if that's a mistake on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Jaguars. However, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is the first. That's right. I'm telling you right now. It is the first national 24 streaming channel on YouTube that's dedicated to sports, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now and available on free Fire TV channels app on Amazon. All right, you guys take care, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care of each other. Until then, take it easy.